Welcome into another edition of VU Sports Wired. We're excited to be back for another week. I'm Max Schneider, your host, alongside Justin Hershey and Bobby Kent. Huge news coming out of the Vanderbilt Athletic office yesterday. Malcolm Turner is out. Candace Storey-Lee is in. The former athletic director handed in his letter of resignation on Tuesday morning. He'll be replaced by Candace Storey-Lee, who has been with the university for 18 years, formerly served as the assistant athletic director to both David Williams and Malcolm Turner. Guys, I want to start with this Turner news because I know this came as a shock to a lot of people. We had heard rumors about this over the weekend, but I don't think anyone really expected it to happen as soon as it did. This all came to pass very quickly. Here's what we know. Malcolm Turner wasn't there at the baseball banquet this weekend on Sunday to honor last year's national championship team and to preview this season, and he wasn't there the day before that for the SEC, for the honoring of the 1993 SEC champion Vanderbilt basketball team, missing in action in both those events. We know that there was likely a dispute between him and the administration about spending. We know he was given a rainy day fund of $17 million, blew through that in the course of 1 year, partially on the buyout of Bryce Drew, partially on renovations, a number of different things, but ultimately the two parties never really saw eye to eye on spending, and that's why Turner handed in his letter of resignation Tuesday morning. Guys, I mean, Justin, you were kind of all over this yesterday. You talked to Jerry Stackhouse about it yesterday. What's kind of the reaction from you and from just kind of this university as a whole?
Well, I mean, first, you got to be shocked. I think, like you said, we heard some stuff over the weekend, but nothing concrete, just rumors. You want to take those sorts of things with a grain of salt. And this is a guy who came in just a year ago, and as we've talked about, he was kind of an out-of-the-box hire in terms of he wasn't in-house. He was kind of more of a business mind. A lot of people looked at him in that way. And I think you got the classic case of he was pulling too hard in some directions, the university was pulling in other directions, and the two could not get on the same page. And if some of these rumors are true, I mean, Malcolm Turner clearly spent some money on things that should not have been invested in. And so it's just a shame for this university. It's a shame for this athletic department that was preparing for a strategic plan, hopefully, for some increased funding for facilities, but it just sets everything back even further than it seems like it has already been set back.
Yeah, I see that the turnover is bad. You definitely don't want that, especially for a program like this that is struggling to get wins in basketball and in football. But I almost see this as a positive. I know that's kind of like the sort of the take not many people have, but I think this is sort of progressive for the school. I think that a lot of people speak very highly of her, of Candace Storey-Lee. I think she has experience as the assistant athletic director. I think being a four-year varsity athlete at this school, especially, she knows what the needs of athletes are and what they want. She's had a relationship with a bunch of the coaches like Tim Corbin, who speaks very highly of her. I saw on Twitter a lot of former players said that that people don't understand how important this was for them, and that this is a big step for the university. So I kind of don't see this in the bad way that a lot of people are, but I do think just the turnover, everything that transpired, how it happened so quickly, is not great. I mean, we were kind of scrambling in the morning to figure out how to cover this. So
yeah,
sure.
I don't think that's great, but I think it's a positive for the university.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying. I think such a large part of the issue is that the controversy, or at least the struggle with athletics over the course of the past few years, is kind of the concern of the fan base and the concern of maybe coaches and student athletes that the university wasn't prepared to fully invest in athletics. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a concern you're always going to have at a strong academic institution, and Vanderbilt's no exception. It's hard to get people to buy into athletics. It's not the driving force behind what makes people know this school, what makes people want to go here. And that's kind of the struggle that athletics has dealt with over the course of the past few years. So to hear that kind of the tipping point was a monetary dispute, to hear that it was an overspending kind of thing, to hear that there was a lack of communication really between the administration and between athletics is troubling. And I know that we've covered athletics in the past. We kind of, that's our world here. And knowing that there's been such a lack of transparency over the course of the past few years, or the past year rather, it's troubling. And this is something that I personally thought Malcolm Turner was doing a good job, But that's part of the issue is I really didn't know.
Right.
And we heard these terms, strategic plan. We heard those buzzwords. We didn't really know what they meant, but we just kind of trusted the guy who had been on top of the NBA G League just a year prior. And we trusted that the strategic plan was in its early stages and that going forward, some of the bigger changes that this university was looking for would take place. Those will likely never take place, at least under his leadership. And Candace Storey-Lee walks into a very difficult situation, a situation with an administration that's likely not so trusting of the athletic department.
I think, Max, you hit on it well. I think when Turner began here, he did a lot of those inside McGugin Center letters, and you heard a lot about what he was thinking about doing, what he wanted to implement. And I think quickly this Vanderbilt sports fans and students even put a lot of blind faith in him because of some of those things, because of some of that planning. But obviously this faith was misplaced or improperly executed by Turner. And I think that just can shatter faith from Vanderbilt fans everywhere. I think the lucky thing is you have as good of a backup as you possibly can in Candace Storey-Lee, and she's only an interim right now, but in my opinion, I think that tag will be dropped rather quickly. But overall, it's just some faith put in someone who didn't execute properly.
Yeah, and I think there was a disconnect, like you alluded to, but between the university and him and his I guess, had bigger plans for what, but didn't necessarily execute them. And that consistency is important, and it's unfortunate that it couldn't get followed through. But I mean, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but yeah, I mean, pick it up.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating, like you alluded to. It's the fact that the tipping point was kind of a lack of communication and a lack of understanding of each other. I want to move to Lee specifically because Bobby, you talked about Lee a little bit, and so much of what Malcolm Turner was, Lee isn't, and so much of what Lee is, Malcolm Turner wasn't. And Justin, you talked about how Malcolm Turner was kind of an outside-the-box hire, a business mind, somebody who came in really having no experience on a college campus or in an athletic office before. Lee has been here for 18 years. She has all the experience in the world inside an athletic office. She knows how the university works. She knows how athletics works. So if Malcolm Turner is an outside-the-box hire, Lee is very much in the box. And that's part of what leads many people, myself included, to believe that she will be the long-term answer, just because I think the university doesn't want to take a big risk. It just took a big risk. The thing we know with outside-the-box hires is it can either be a great hire or it can be a disaster. And this turned out to be a disaster. At least that's the impression that most people are getting at this point. So I think Lee is an excellent plan B for this university, and I think she does have a lot of work to do to pick up where Malcolm Turner left off and to really show that this is not an athletic program that needs to be in crisis perpetually.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the administration went with a candidate who they knew, they were familiar with. It was not a scary decision for them to make.
It's safe. Exactly.
Right, exactly. It's a safe decision for them to make, which is only natural after such a disaster with such an outside-the-box hire, as you mentioned, Max. And I think everyone has a right to be excited about Candace Storey-Lee. I mean, she's been here, as you said, for almost 2 decades, and she played here. She knows the student-athlete experience here, and I think that's huge. And the other thing is, we talked about the lack of communication between Malcolm Turner and the administration and the athletic office, et cetera. You have to think that's not going to be present here. With how long Candace Storey-Lee has been working at this university, with how many relationships she figures to have, even Jerry Stackhouse talked about it yesterday. He talks to her more than he talked to Malcolm Turner during his tenure. So she's someone that a lot of people on this campus have a lot of respect for, and I think that says a lot about her ability to take on this role.
Yeah, and you have to think that some of those communication issues that were present with Malcolm Turner are going to sort of go away.
Exactly.
And that she'll want to listen to the student athletes, and she'll listen more to the coaches of what exactly do they need to be successful. And we know we've heard, Derek Mason in his press conferences talk about facilities and talk about, helping with recruiting and everything. And maybe she'll be more responsive to those issues, and sort of put that plan in place that's not necessarily just such a big, overarching, it's in the early stages. Maybe she'll make it happen. So who knows? But I think some of those communication issues that kind of result in an instability will tend to go away.
One thing we're seeing in kind of the wake of Lee taking over is a lot of former student athletes
Yeah.
showing their respect for her on Twitter, on social media. Tommy Openshaw and Oren Burks both talked about how Candace Storey Lee was kind of a lifeline for them at this university. Casey Hayward, I mean, that guy's an all-pro in the NFL. He spoke very highly of Candace Storey Lee. So certainly these student athletes are on board, and that's extremely important, not just for current student athletes, for former student athletes, but also for prospective student athletes that are looking at this university and saying, does this university care about me as a student athlete? Candace Storey Lee is somebody who will. Justin, you talked to Stackhouse yesterday. What was kind of the initial reaction from him? I mean, he said he didn't really know anything that was really going on here, but remember, Stackhouse is a guy who was brought in by Turner. Turner really had to push him to come here. I don't think, kind of like Turner, Stackhouse didn't really have any experience in the college game beyond playing it.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Stackhouse, I think Vanderbilt fans in general, and us included, had this notion that Turner and Stackhouse were very close. They were kind of attached at the hip. And I think at first that was the case, but as their time on this campus developed, they went in awfully different directions as far as Stackhouse taking the lead on basketball, Turner taking the lead on all sports in general, and I think that pulled them apart a little bit. I certainly think Stackhouse was very surprised. I don't think he was kept in the loop entirely on this decision, and I think that definitely was a bit rattling for him. But as he mentioned, he's here to win basketball games. He wants to create a culture here. And we've talked about the possibility of him leaving or not being a part of this program moving forward. I don't think that's realistic. I think he's here at least for some stretch of time the next few years here. And I think he's committed to some of these freshmen, these freshmen that he was able to keep on board after Bryce Drew was fired. And he's invested something in them and wants to continue to help them develop as players and young men. So I think Stackhouse was surprised, but he's eager to get back to work and get this team an SEC win.
Yeah, I mean, and even didn't he say something along the lines of that Malcolm Turner was one of the biggest reasons that he came to Vanderbilt in the first place?
Sure.
And I think that, no, I agree with you. I don't think he'll give up on the university after 1 year. I think he realizes that there is a process here. I think, and it's also very encouraging that he talked to Candace Storey Lee a lot, and that she'll be able to give him valuable insight into what the student athletes have to go through, and then it'll only help him be able to establish a culture and be supportive of his athletes, and help mature these guys into potentially very good players like down the line. So I think he's a bigger professional, and he can sort of see the bigger picture than to just kind of give up on a program 1 year after instability. And I mean, I'm sure he's had instability during his playing days when in the NBA, and he's had instability at other places. So he's dealt with it, and he knows sort of what to do. While it's unsettling, he wasn't exactly in the loop. I think he'll stick with it, and I think he'll stay for the long haul.
He made it very clear that he was celebrating this for Candace Storey Lee. He was excited for her as she's someone he's worked with in the past and enjoys working with. So I think that's a really good sign, and I think Stackhouse remains on board. And he did make that comment last year when he was hired that Malcolm Turner really brought him into this job. But I think after a year here, after really getting down and into the nitty-gritty of running a college team, I do think he enjoys this, and I do think he wants to see this through and create something real here on West End.
Vanderbilt fans certainly hope so. Already cycled through 3 athletic directors in the last 3 years. If Candace Storey Lee's interim title does hold, could be a 4th one next year. The last thing that Vanderbilt needs is another basketball coach. Another third in the past 3 years would be the 4th in the past 6. Vanderbilt's certainly hoping that's not the case. Stackhouse is in action tonight. His team will take the court against LSU at 8 o'clock Central Time. LSU's 8-0. They are perfect in SEC play. They're the 18th ranked team in the country. Vanderbilt, on the flip side of things, is 0-8, still hunting for their first SEC win in 2 seasons. Guys, on paper, this looks like David and Goliath. This looks like this should be a classic kind of blowout. Team comes to Memorial Gym, especially a team like LSU that's so aggressive, that really takes advantage of weaker opponents. Do you think that's kind of the way this game will go tonight, or what do you think Vanderbilt has to do to make sure this isn't a runaway early?
Well, I mean, I think you could also look at Kentucky. The game against Kentucky is a David versus Goliath. Even Florida is a sort of almost David versus Goliath, and they hung in there. And I think this team plays up to their competition and unfortunately plays down to their competition at times too. And it's unfortunate that these are the games that you want to see them play well against teams like this, but it's unfortunate in a sense too because these are the teams that know how to finish games versus the not so good teams that necessarily don't necessarily know how to do that. But they only lost by 6 against Florida, lost by 9 against Kentucky. You have to think a win is coming, right? I mean, I say that with some apprehension because who knows, but I think I point to Pippen being very consistent in the last 2 games. He had 12 points against Kentucky and 15 points on 4 of 8 shooting against Florida. Disu had 13 against Kentucky and 3 against Florida. But I think the consistency from Pippen and from Lee is only a good thing. And I think this will be a competitive game. Do I think they win? No. But I think this will be a competitive game within 10 again.
I think it's a terrible matchup for us. I'll be quite honest.
All right.
No, I mean, look, it's 18th ranked team in the country, and it's a team that's well coached. It got a ton of length, a lot of experience, couple of upperclassmen who are real impact players. So I don't think this is a great matchup, but my confidence level in this team to win a game has gone up significantly in the last week and a half. I think when you look at the last few games for this team, you've seen Saben Lee, Dylan Disu, and Scottie Pippen each have a really good game in their last 3 or 4 games. Once they can figure out how to play a little better as a unit, you're going to see one of these games. I have to believe that all 3 of those guys are going to play a good game on the same day, and maybe this team can pull out a win.
Even if they do, I don't know if tonight's
Tonight's
night.
not.
That's what's so troubling about a team like LSU.
Yeah.
If Vanderbilt isn't within 10 of the offensive rebounding battle,
right,
they're not winning this game. I mean, and that's a tall task. LSU rebounds the ball extremely well. They block shots extremely
super
well.
athletic.
Yeah,
and if we know Vanderbilt's weakness over the course of the past few years, it's the lack of a post presence down low. And Vanderbilt struggled against teams that are bigger, stronger, more athletic. This is one of those teams. And LSU they're really a tough out, and like you said, Bobby, it's because they know how to win close games. LSU's 8-0 in SEC play. 7 of those wins are by 5 points or less. Right. This is a team that knows how to win close games. So even if Vanderbilt's in this game, they're going to have to execute perfectly within the last 3 to 5 minutes if they want to win it, and that's what we saw them do for so much of the game against Kentucky, and then not be able to close in those last 5 minutes. They have to play a perfect basketball game, and that includes the last few minutes of this game if they want to knock off LSU.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the offensive rebounding is going to be huge. Look, I want to have more confidence tonight, but I just really don't. I just really don't have it unless they shoot really well. I think Ejike Obina has struggled the last couple of games.
He did have 10 double-digit rebounds last time out.
Yeah,
which is encouraging for him, but the offensive game.
No, definitely. The offensive game is really stunted, and I think Matt Moyer played a really solid game last time out, and I think he's someone
8
off the bench, 2 threes. I think he's someone you got to go to in this game to just throw out there to get some rebounds, maybe block a shot here or there, give some energy, and for sheer size. I completely agree with you. So we'll see if Coach Stackhouse goes to him at all.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic, but I'm kind of forever the optimist. But we'll always root for my team.
At least there's one.
But yeah, right, maybe.
Hey, we're rooting.
I'm only a freshman.
Baseball is soon. Baseball is coming.
That's right.
So we will be back next week to preview baseball in its entirety. Basketball tips off in about an hour at Memorial Gym, 8 o'clock Central Time against 18th ranked LSU. That'll wrap it up for this week's edition of VU Sports Wired. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with basketball, with baseball, hopefully some more updates on the Malcolm Turner news and on the Candace Story Lee news. That's all coming next week. Thank you so much for listening.